Welcome back to our channel. Today's recap is about a 1994 American crime drama film called The Shawshank Redemption. The movie chronicles the tale of banker Andy Dufresne, who in spite of his denials of guilt, is given a life sentence at Shawshank State Prison for the murders of his wife and her boyfriend. Over the next 2 decades, he develops a friendship with fellow prisoner and drug dealer Elise Red Redding and helps the prison warden Samuel Norton with a money laundering scheme. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. Andy Dufresne, a Maine banker, is convicted of killing his wife and her boyfriend, a golf pro, in 1947. Because Maine doesn't have a capital penalty, he's sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms and transported to the infamously harsh Shawshank prison. Andy maintains his innocence, but his cold and calculating personality convinces everyone to assume he committed the crime. Meanwhile, Alice Boyd Redding, often known as Red, is being examined for parole after serving a 20-year sentence at Shawshank. Red's parole is denied despite his best efforts and demeanor, which doesn't bother him all that much. Red is then presented as the local smuggler who can acquire convicts anything they desire as long as it's reasonable. Andy is sent to work in the prison laundry. An alarm sounds to notify all convicts of incoming arrivals. Red and his buddies wager on which new fish will suffer a nervous breakdown on his first night in jail. Red lays a large wager on Andy. During the first night, an overweight, recently arrived inmate dubbed Fat Ass collapses and sobs, allowing Haywood to win the bet. The euphoria, however, is short-lived when the top guard brutally beats up the overweight man for not being silent when instructed. Meanwhile, Andy maintains his cool. The convicts find the next morning that Fat Ass died in the infirmary because the jail doctor had gone out for the night. Andy asks Haywood for the man's name, but he declines. Andy approaches Red about a month later, having heard of his ability for discovering items. He requests that Red locate him a rock hammer, which he claims is required for his passion of rock collection and carving. Andy chuckles as Red asks him a few questions about his goals. Red agrees to place the order but warns Andy about the Sisters, a gang of inmates who sexually attack other inmates, most notably its leader, Boggs, who has a thing on Andy. Though the other convicts regard Andy as a very frigid fish, Red sees something in him and likes him right away. Andy spends the first 2 years of his captivity laboring in the prison laundry or battling Boggs and the Sisters. Andy is beaten and raped on a regular basis, despite his relentless resistance in battle. Yet, he remains silent about it. When a work detail for tarring the roof of one of the prison's buildings is announced, Red uses his connections to have Andy and a couple of their common friends assigned to the assignment, providing everyone a respite from the routine. Andy overhears Hadley whining about having to pay taxes on a future inheritance while on the job. Andy, using his experience as a banker, explains to Hadley how he may avoid paying taxes by converting his money into a one-time gift for his wife. He then offers to help Hadley with the paperwork in return for some cool beers for his other detainees while tarring. Hadley threatens Andy with throwing him over the roof at first, but finally offers to supply the working convicts with cool drinks before the task is completed. Andy may have orchestrated the privilege to curry favor with the jail authorities as well as his other convicts, but Red believes Andy did it merely to feel normal again. While viewing a movie, Andy approaches Red with yet another unexpected request: Rita Hayworth. The demand surprises Red, but he agrees to place the order. Andy runs into the Sisters again as he departs the theater. Despite his ability to argue his way out of being raped, he's severely beaten within an inch of his life, landing him in the hospital for a month. Boggs is sentenced to a week in solitary confinement for the beating. When he emerges, Hadley and his men are waiting for him in a cell. They severely beaten him, leaving him unable to walk or consume solid food for the remainder of his life, and he's transported to a prison hospital upstate. The Sisters leave Andy alone and never disturb him again. When Andy emerges from the infirmary, he discovers a pile of pebbles for him to sculpt and a massive poster of Rita Hayworth in his cell, both gifts from Red and his buddies. Warden Samuel Norton learns of Andy's assistance to Hadley and conducts a surprise cell check to assess Andy. While the guards are turning the cell upside down looking for illegal goods, he discovers Andy reading his copy of the Holy Bible and they discuss their favorite verses. The warden exits, satisfied with their interaction, almost forgetting to return Andy's Bible. He then encourages Andy to continue reading the Bible, adding salvation is found inside. Andy is eventually informed that he will be working at the prison library with aging convict Brooks Hatlin. When a jail officer arrives and asks Andy for financial advice, the reason for his relocation becomes clear. Andy puts up a makeshift desk and begins working. coaching most jail guards on financial matters and assisting them with their income tax filings. Andy sees a chance to enhance the jail library and begins the requesting cash from the Maine State Senate. Every week, he writes letters. His financial support practice is so well-liked that guards from other prisons seek Andy's financial advice when they visit for inter-prison baseball games. Andy is even preparing his tax returns for the warden. Andy began sending weekly letters to the state government pleading for cash to rebuild the prison's dilapidated library. Brooks gets released from prison after serving 50 years, but he struggles to adjust and finally hangs himself. The legislature sends a library gift that contains a tape of Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. Andy is punished with solitary imprisonment after playing a passage over the public address system. Andy explains to a disdainful Red after his release from solitary confinement that optimism is what gets him through his sentence. Norton began using convict labor for public works projects in 1963, earning by undercutting skilled labor costs and accepting bribes. Andy uses identity Randall Stephens to launder the money. In 1965, Tommy Williams was imprisoned for burglary. Andy and Red become friends with him, and Andy assists him in passing his GED exam. Tommy tells Red and Andy a year later that his cellmate at another prison claimed responsibility for the killings for which Andy was convicted. When Andy implies money laundering, Norton orders him back to solitary prison. Norton has Hadley shoot Tommy to death in the pretense of an escape attempt. Andy refuses to continue the money laundering, but Norton threatens to demolish the library, removing Andy's guard's protection and relocate him to a harsher location. After 2 months in solitary confinement, Andy informs a doubtful Red that he wants to live in Zihuatanejo, a Mexican town on the Pacific coast. Andy also informs him about a certain hayfield near Buxton and asks Red to fetch a package that Andy buried there once it gets released. Red is concerned about Andy's well-being, especially after learning that Andy requested a fellow inmate for some rope. The guards discover Andy's cell vacant the next day during roll call. An enraged Norton hurls a rocket or Cal Welch, posting hanging on the cell wall, revealing a tunnel constructed by Andy with his rock hammer during the preceding 19 years. Andy had used the rope to escape through the tunnel and jail sewage pipe the night before, taking Norton's coat, shoes, and ledger, which included evidence of the money laundering. While guards look for him, Andy disguises himself as Randall Stephens, withdraws approximately $370,000 in laundered money from several banks, equivalent to $3.09 million currently, and mails the ledger and other proof of the corruption and killings at Shawshank to a local newspaper. State police come to Shawshank and arrest Hadley, while Norton commits himself in order to avoid capture. After serving 40 years, Red is ultimately released the following year. He's struggling to adjust to life outside of prison and thinks that he will never do so. Remembering his commitment to Andy, he returns to Buxton and discovers a stash containing money and a letter inviting him to Zihuatanejo. Red breaches his parole by traveling to Fort Hancock, Texas, and crossing into Mexico, revealing that he has finally found home. He runs across Andy on a beach in Zihuatanejo, and the two reunited buddies embrace enthusiastically. And that is all about this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with such interesting movie recap videos here.